G'day, Andy Maher here. Welcome to The Blueprint, proudly brought to you by our good friends at Hyundai. Well, our usual co-host Mark McClure is not with us today, having a sabbatical. Instead, we're joined by the 1987 Norm Smith medalist, one of our favourites here around the Carlton Football Club, David Rhys-Jones. Rhys, great to have you back on the show. Thanks for dropping in again.
Great to be here.
Last couple of weeks, we're fortnightly, of course, this year. Last couple of weeks, we've knocked over North Melbourne and the Gold Coast. Gold Coast at Metricon these days is no easy feat to go up there and win by 7 goals. And in a bizarre game of footy, beat North, who we've had real trouble with in recent years. It'd be a big tick for the last fortnight for this footy team.
Yeah, it really has. And I must admit, I said all the way along that I thought that our back half of the year was always going to be where we'd settle a bit more. And I think with a new coach coming in, it's proven to be that way. And, you know, tough game this week, but they've been good over the last fortnight.
You talk about settling. He was settled down back, Lockie Henderson, but since we've needed him to go forward, he just looks a natural forward all of a sudden. Have you made up your mind as to which end of the ground you want to see this bloke play most of his footy from now on?
I think it'd be great to have him at both ends from time to time. And the same with, you know, Jared Waite when he comes back. He's capable of doing the same. So flexibility in today's football is super important. And look, if Lockie needs to go back, if we're having trouble with a big forward back, he'll have to go back at times as well. So it's just the nature of the modern game.
Well, you mentioned Jared Waite. We may as well have a chat about him now. Mick, we had him on SEN yesterday, and he was saying that when he does come back, he's still working it out. You're not necessarily automatically going to throw him back where he was before, that he might use him as a floater, might even go back. Have you got an alternate view as to how we might be able to slip Jared Waite into this team the way it's set up at the moment?
Well, he's such a mobile, big guy. And, you know, I mean, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I remember him playing on a wing on Matthew Richardson. It was a great contest, and he actually beat Richo, and which is no mean feat anywhere. So Jared can play anywhere. I was probably a bit disappointed when he kicked those 7 goals, and I reckon he just got stuck in that forward role, and I think he probably could have been moved out at times earlier, you know, this year. But, look, flexibility is the key, as I said before. And
one of the reasons we're able to be a bit more flexible with maybe Jared Waite and certainly Lockie Henderson is the performance of the last 3 or 4 weeks of Matthew Watson. They've rolled the dice, they've put him in. Now, you saw him a lot in the VFL, and I think you might have been a bit dubious about whether his form warranted senior selection. He's certainly doing enough at the moment to hold his spot, and that becomes really important now, the role that he's playing. Yeah,
it does. And the reason I was a bit critical of him, you know, the VFL telecast, and that was he lacks that desperation, you know, you really need as a defender, you know, to really get that lunge in at that last yard and get the spoil. And he was just going through the motions a bit. But look, he's been good to his credit, but he's a young guy too, and so you've got to give him a little bit of time. But I'd like to still see him a little bit more desperate and hungry back there.
He has been using the footy beautifully. Every time he gets it, you know it's going to go to another Carlton player. One of the great success stories from an individual perspective is Ed Curnow. Doesn't get any plaudits outside the Carlton Footy Club and probably doesn't get enough within. There's so many others that we probably look at first. But they threw the big task to him last week. Now, Ablett's still got 30 plus, but didn't he do a good job at negating Ablett's effectiveness?
Well, yeah, and we saw the week before. I mean, Ablett almost single-handedly destroyed Collingwood, but and he's such a great player, Ablett. But he's done some great roles this year, Curnow, and he's been a vital part of what Mick's really putting together back there.
He's part of a midfield now that is pretty solid in terms of the names that we see go through there. There's a real defensive edge to the way the Carlton boys set up from a midfield perspective now. We know they've got the offensive run when they need to have it. Do you like the way the midfield's operating at the moment, the numbers that they're getting and the types of players and the roles that they're performing through there?
Yeah, I think it's taken a while. I'd like to see Murph and Gibbsy getting a bit more of the ball because they're so damaging. But and Juddy's the same. But their defensive side is probably not there. So Mick's balanced it pretty well with it. You know, a number of good tagging type players as well.
Just the 19 for Judd last week. I say just the 19, but 15 of them were contested. He doesn't know how to take himself away from the cut and thrust and get himself some easy possessions. I know there's been a conversation that people at the footy club have been having for a long time to try and get him to get some easier, cheaper footy, but he refuses to either do it or listen, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's a bit like Sticks Kernahan. I used to always say to Sticks, well, you're always getting hard ball, you know what I mean? You know, I played on guys like Burton and these guys, and they'd cheat and get the sneaky ones, and Sticks never did it, and neither does this guy. He's just... puts his nose over the footy. He's a beauty, and he just works so hard every single game he plays.
And this bloke just keeps chugging along, and He's set himself a nice high standard now, Brock McLean, hasn't he, at this level? Now that he's got that foot and that ankle right, and he's had it right for a couple of years, he's just re-established himself as a genuine AFL footballer.
Oh, look, he was a top 10 draft pick and a Best and Fairest winner at Melbourne, and so there's no doubting what he had, and injuries, really curtailed what he could do, but he's showing now that he's a very good footballer.
You've been seeing a lot of Nick Graham, more than probably most of us in your VFL coverage on the AB, so I can't remember a bloke at this club who's been in such good form for so long in the reserve grade team, the VFL team as it is now, who hasn't been called up. How ready is he to play, and how much do you want to see Nick Graham given a crack at senior level?
He's a ball magnet. He's one of these guys. I mean, we spoke about Tom Mitchell, who was coming in from the NEFL and picked up a lot of possessions. This kid just keeps getting the ball. He runs to the right position. He's got a strong enough body. So, look, I'd love to see him playing, and let's hope he's in there soon, because he's one of those guys who just has a knack and just keep getting the ball.
It'd be a nice time for him to come in, given the sort of form that Matthew Cruz has found himself in the last 3 weeks. It was about 3 or 4 weeks ago that it seemed like everybody in the footy media was laying the boots on him. Every commentator was saying that he wasn't producing enough. The last 3 or 4 weeks, since that weekend, he certainly answered the critics to a degree.
Well, one of the more laughable suggestions I read, that he was going to be used as trade bait sort of thing, and which is ridiculous. I mean, a guy at 6'8", 6'9", I mean, they normally come on in their, 24, 25 is when they start. He's had so much pressure on him from day one, basically, and I just love his attitude, the way he goes about it. Everything's a contest. He in the air, on the ground. He's fantastic.
He's been so decisive around the contest. And I think he's had a real factor. We know what he's like at second and third efforts, but he's been really clean in terms of, obviously, the drop down. But the ones that when he wants to clear that contested area of recent times, he's got a real capacity now to do it with a big decisive fist. He's come into some pretty significant form.
And the other thing is his marking. A couple of really telling marks against North Melbourne, defensive
Absolutely.
marks and pushing back was terrific. And I think that'll do his confidence, a lot going forward anyway.
Same interview we had with Mick Moldhouse during the week. He said these boys, this group that he's coaching at Carlton, loves a challenge. Well, the challenge they get at the hand of Fremantle this Saturday night is significant. I mean, you've only got to look at that. Everybody's talking about Sydney, Geelong, Hawthorn being clear of the pack in terms of the teams to beat for the flag this year. Well, it depends on how you rate Fremantle. A lot of us still want to throw Fremantle into the mix. And when you see what they're capable of doing defensively, you can see where we sit in comparison to the big three in terms of scores against. They demand a side to beat them still, don't they?
Well, that's why I hate watching them, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
They're not a good team to watch, Fremantle. They're so defensive and hard to score against. The real thing you need to do is get them early, get goals in front of them, get 4 or 5 goals in front of them, because then they have to change their game. They have to start putting some goals on, so they have to make some changes to what they're very, very comfortable in, and it's just that negative style football. So let's hope, if you get 4 or 5 goals in front of them, they have to change the whole game plan around, and they're not suited to it.
I wonder whether the coaches will do something with Michael Johnson. He's in All-Australian form, and he seems to be loving the idea of kind of floating around and across half-back and second man up or taking on a direct opponent. I don't know how much of the Dockers you've seen this year, but he is in scintillating form.
He's a big guy who's quick,
Yeah.
and that's the one thing about him, and he covers ground, in that back half, and he'll leave his opponent and help his teammates out, and he's become a real important part of their defence.
One of the big stories away from the footy this week at Carlton has been Eddie Betts' contract situation. Now, we read during the week that it's been put off, negotiations have been put off till the end of the year. It was reported, Rhys, that his management was looking for somewhere in the vicinity of $600,000 a year for Ed. Now, we love Eddie Betts around the footy club. I wonder whether 600,000's a bit of an overreach for even a player of the calibre of Betts.
Oh, look, I mean, your manager's always going to try the top dollar first, and it's easier to work your way down than work your way up from where you start from. So, look, I'm sure it'll get sorted. Eddie's such an important player. You talk to some of the players around. He's a real character and a great clubman, and the players love him. And you can't afford to lose players like that.
Still, it's good to know that that's still actually a valued asset in the modern game. We seem to be homogenising the game to such a degree, but to know that a bloke is still extra value because he is liked by his teammates and a good a good character within the group, and the fans like him and people around the footy club like him, it's nice to know that's still a valued commodity.
Oh, look, it's still very important because you got to remember that these guys, they spend so much time together, and you need to have blokes with that little larrikin edge about them, and Eddie seems to be one of those types, and I think he adds a lot to the playing group, and not only off the field, but definitely on the field as well, but. Got to be realistic with your price too.
I think you do. If you're watching this and you've never been a Spirit of Carlton once, you don't know what you're missing out on. The next one comes up next week. It's the captains we're celebrating, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. Rhys, you're going to be there, and it's a great day to be in the midst of some of the greats of the footy club. This does promise to be one of the really good ones, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it certainly will be, and we'll have all our living Carlton captains there. All the current playing group will be there. Mick Moldhouse will be getting up and saying a few words about leadership and so forth, and got some great raffle prizes, so it's going to be an auction items. It's going to be a great day.
Still a couple of seats left, so if you're at all interested in getting along, go to the Carlton website and follow the links all the way through. Make sure you get there and give yourself an extra hour or two at the end of it all. Don't want to be rushing back to the office on a day after a day like this. Rhys, you've done very well. I hope Sellers doesn't watch this. He might be very, very twitchy if he's watching your performance today.
I see someone with hair and a bit thinner than him, eh?
And not those silly glasses that he wears. Great to spend some time with you. Thanks for coming
Andy.
on.
Terrific.
David Rhys-Jones, that's all we have time for on today's show. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time, so catch us on Thursday the 15th of August. Until then, have a great weekend. Let's knock over the Dockers. Enjoy the footy.